Welcome to Gray to Great, the podcast where we will pull back the curtain on what it truly takes to thrive as a corporate retirement plan advisor in today's tech-powered business world. I'm Dan Dal Degan, but all my friends call me Triple D. As a former sales leader and CEO and now board member of the Great Group, I know that success in this field goes beyond the numbers. In each episode, I'm going to team up with one of your peer retirement plan advisors to bring you the strategies that separate the best from the rest. From prospecting and referral business to challenger selling and tech adoption, we're diving deep into the parts of the business that too many of us overlook. Whether you're here to sharpen your skills or if you're looking for the next big idea, this is where the playbook gets rewritten. So get ready for sharp, actionable insights that'll take your practice to the next level. Because in sales, there's no gray area. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Gray to Great. I am Dan Dal Degan, our host, and I'm joined today by Kristine Meyer, who's a retirement plan specialist and relationship manager with Stiles Financial Services in the Twin Cities of Minnesota. Welcome, Kristine.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I think we first met out of the Vegas Napa show. We started this conversation. I'm delighted that we have a chance to continue it in front of our listeners.
Yeah, happy.
And so maybe a good place to start. We chatted a bit about this at our booth out at Napa, which was how you got your start as a retirement plan advisor in this world. And I'd love to hear that origin story. And I think it'll build us the conversation that our listeners will be very eager to hear about how you've built and grown your practice.
Yeah, sure. So like many people in our industry, we kind of just fell into it. Retirement plans are not something that you learn about in college, especially if you're a bachelor's of the arts kind of student. You don't know what 401k is until you go to your first job and get thrown a packet of just information and verbiage and symbols that you don't understand, right? And there's
Cryptic
figure it
language.
out. Yeah, very cryptic. So I started working just entry-level job at a advisory firm, a small one. So small firms I think they're great because there's a lot of learning opportunity. You get to see a lot more because it's not as siloed. And that's kind of followed me throughout my whole career. So I kind of found a niche in the retirement space just because I've always been a big fan of education and empowering people. We'll talk a little bit about that, I'm sure. But really, it felt very genuine to be able to go into that space and help bring people to saving for retirement. And it's just been a passion to help not just the participants, but also the employers, because, it's a tool for both the employer and their employee base. And over almost 2 decades of this now, just working with each individual client has been really cool. A lot of diversity and experience and needs and providers that, it's kept me excited because I keep getting to learn. So that's how I am. I took a leap, came to Stiles about 6 years ago, right before 2020. Just leave it at that for that year. But and it's been a growing opportunity that I've really been able to specialize in this area.
Wonderful. And as you've grown that practice, you shared with me, and you even started to hint at it just here, Kristine, your ideal client profile, how you try to focus on the right mix of characteristics for the plan sponsors and even the plan participants that you work with.
Yeah.
What does that shape look like? And then how do you do that qualification process?
Yeah. So a lot of firms or even providers are just interested in amassing as much as they can, right? It's about, ask about a firm, what's your AUM, right? It's like, well, AUM is one thing, but it's more about the experience of the client. So for us, if somebody wants, a big flashy name or an off-the-box solution, that's not going to be a fit with us. So that then ties into the quality of the client. So we fit well with kind of more paternalistic employers that really care about their plan representing their firm, being a benefit to their employees. They're not about being the cheapest or the easiest. Like they care very deeply about their plan because we do too. And that's how we end up being a good fit for the clients that we have. So whether that's, a $400 million plan or a $1 million plan, or even, a newer plan that is getting started up but has the potential to grow, those are the ones that we tend to vibe with the best.
That's great. And I imagine that when you find yourself in a conversation with a firm that really fits that profile, does that give you the feeling you can deliver the most value to them?
Yeah, definitely. It's communication is more about listening than talking. So it's getting to know them and then knowing what we're capable of delivering as a firm and then filtering it to what they're going to want. Because some plans, their providers, they want to focus more on, the metrics, the participation, are people on track for saving? Others are more, what's the experience like? Are they able to get custom education for their employees that's not, off the shelf either? So just to be able to get a better outcome overall for whatever their needs are.
That's great. And I love the way you framed that, Kristine, that communication is more about listening than talking. And
Hmm.
it's such a simple principle. And
Yeah.
yet, do you find it's still pretty rare? And I imagine it's a differentiator for you is your adept listening skills.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Yeah. There are certain, we interact with all kinds of companies and all types of providers as well. And there are some where you're just like, this is not about what we're trying to solve. This is about you. And that's usually a pretty quick, like, this is not the place for you, right?
Yes.
So just like our team is the same too, right? You have to be focused on the same goal, the same outcome, and know that it's not just one person that's right. It's an agreement is a compromise. It's finding everything in the middle. You're never going to be 100% from everybody. You just have to buy into the end goal.
Sounds like a wonderful principle of any relationship, professional or personal, right?
Yes, I would agree.
Compromise. Negotiation is about great compromise.
Yes,
That's well
yep,
said.
absolutely.
Now, it sounds like you're also speaking in part, at least, about the culture at Stiles. Tell us a little
Yeah,
bit about that. It sounds really
yeah.
progressive.
Yeah, so our motto internally is fierce independence. So, that might come off as slightly aggressive, but it's a real tenet that we anchor ourselves on because we are always fiduciaries. Many people say they are, but they don't always act like it, right? Being a fiduciary means putting your client first always, and it's not about what we get out of it. So fierce independence means that we don't hitch our wagon to any one platform, right? We had a broker dealer for a while. We decided to go fully independent. We picked the right record keeper based off of the needs for our clients. On the retirement plan side, we are vendor neutral, right? So we don't have one provider that we work with the best or that we prefer to work with, even if it's more difficult for us as advisors. That doesn't mean that it's the right fit just because it's good for us. It might be better for the client, right? So it's about knowing what each provider brings to the table and then, helping the client know what devil they're getting into bed with, right? So there's good and bad to everything and
Which
making sure
devil
that
they're
they
gonna get in
know.
bed with. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power, right? So, and I'm frank with people about that. Like, this is what's going to happen if you go with this one. And then the same comes to our fund lineups. We don't have just one lineup for all of our plans. It would make our job a lot easier, certainly. But, there are certain needs that different clients have. If a client base has, a high, Muslim population, they can't invest in traditional investments. So we have to know that. We have to be representing those people so they're not, left not at the table with everybody else. So we want to make sure that it's the right fit, for the demographics of the company, whether that's, the provider or the fund lineup, all of those.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you're suggesting a level of qualification in how you target plan sponsors that you're gonna educate and enable the plan participants, the employees of that organization, in a way that it's going to bring enlightenment and optionality.
Yeah.
And I like the way, Kristine, you're highlighting the trade offs because there's probably very rarely a simple, clean, 100% certain answer. These are heavily nuanced conversations and decisions that you have to guide the plan participants through. I'm curious, how do you do that in a way that comes across as educational? Because it can be a bit intimidating sometimes with the vernacular we
Yeah.
use, and
Absolutely.
how do you deliver that in a way that is not intimidating to the plan participant?
Yeah, again, that comes back to really knowing our clients, right? Because the type of language you're going to use is going to be dependent on who you're talking to, right? So, a CFO in a boardroom is going to understand some verbiage about, economics and finance much more than, someone who just graduated college, right? That wasn't an economics degree, right? So, there's different vocabularies, there's different words, we have to remember we can't just throw around like 404C like everybody knows what that means, right? You have to be like, "Oh, yeah, no, that's this code," and then we explain it and try to make it, it's not always peanut butter and jelly language. Sometimes people would disengage if you put it too low. So it's kind of finding that right fit in there. When it comes to interacting with participants, We work with the companies. We ask the people who interact with the employees on a daily basis, what do they want to see? We have plans where we'll set it for the year ahead. What education topics do we want to talk about? What's of interest to your group? Because, decumulation strategies might make sense for an older workforce, but, if the average age is 35, they're not going to want to think about that. They're going to be interested in some other things that are more pertinent for their situation. So, and then coming up with the way to kind of not advertise, but engage to get people to actually show up to those. So, and most things are virtual now, right? Like asking people to show up in person, it's difficult and things have transitioned. So you kind of have to be able to pivot because, there are times when I'm the only one on camera and I just have to assume that everybody's listening. So
And you have to get
whatever
comfortable with
fashion.
looking at your own face, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
be like, okay,
We've
here
all done
I am
that since
again.
COVID. Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. In this generation of a lot of virtual meetings, the old model of doing a lunch and learn and coming into
Hmm.
the physical space and doing a lunch hour orientation on investment options for retirement planning, it's a different ball game today. You got to find more creative ways to engage the audience, right?
Yep, absolutely. And, not take it personally if people back out because we've seen that happen. You got to be flexible. I mean, life happens really fast. So, you got to be able to kind of pivot and make it work, and we always do. You figure it out.
Indeed. So the distinction you were drawing there earlier, Kristine, and the generation of the plan participants that you serve, that's a very important differentiator, and probably the language you use and how you position investment options, and even which options you're going to present to somebody my age in my early 60s compared to somebody who's starting their career at one of your plan sponsor organizations. And in particular, we talk so much in this generation now these days about the generation that my children represent, millennials and Gen Z, as having a different set of needs in terms of, which makes sense given their age and the times that they're going through that are very different than when I was their age. How do you solve for that? And how does that influence and shape the way that you engage and communicate with and serve the needs of, let's say, Gen Z clients?
Yeah. I think going back to that, listening is 80% of communication, right? I think it can be really difficult to try to understand something that you've never experienced firsthand because we're all very much shaped by what our experience is. So you have to have a curiosity about other people and their experiences to understand where they're at. So just because one thing's been done a certain way all the time doesn't mean that it continues to be the right answer. Like, it's kind of a harsh phrase, but it's very true. You either have to adapt or die. The next generations are coming, whether you're ready for them or not, whether you want them or not. You can't do your job forever. You have to be able to figure out a way to continue on, just like any business continuation plan is there. You have to do the same for your workforce. And that can mean you're going to have to change your retirement plan to fit the needs of that generation. And, they have different attitudes about what they've gone through in their lives. There's been some really, people can do the math when I say I've been doing this for almost 2 decades, right? You can figure out that I'm like an elder millennial. And the number of once in a lifetime events that have happened can make us really cynical a lot of the time, or give us a wicked sense of humor. That's how
Not
at least,
mutually exclusive, by the way. It could be
yeah,
both.
yeah. Like everybody goes through their stuff, but there's been a lot of things that have happened in a way that have never been experienced before, right? Like Gen Z was born with electronics in their hand, like my daughter is better at typing. She's almost 10. She's better at technology than I am sometimes. And good for her, right? But it means I have to work a little harder. And just knowing that they have had access to everything very quickly, right? And doesn't mean that the way that our brains experience things has changed just because the method has, right? So, they call Gen Z the anxious generation because they've had a lot of uncertainty that's happened, right in front of them. I remember 9/11 happened, and as a millennial, that happened. I saw the second plane hit live in class, right? Like that didn't happen 10 years before that. Cable news wasn't a thing then. So everything has changed and everything is short form. Attention spans are so short and there's just so many competing priorities. So you really have to listen to what their concerns are and say, okay, you're very tech savvy, but Gen Z can also be a little tech wary. And especially with the way that AI has just blown things up, that's completely changed the workforce too. So understanding those fears that need to be addressed before you can even get them to listen and engage. That's kind of what I think the key to bridging that gap is asking those questions and repeating back what you hear to let
Right.
them know that you heard them. Not
Right.
just like, "Uh-huh, yeah, okay, whatever,"
Yes.
go about my way.
And you're describing meeting the audience where they are, right? And
Yes,
all that
yeah.
that means in the experiences they've had growing up generationally. Do you find that when you approach those conversations that way, that impacts the responses that you're getting back and the level of engagement?
Yes, absolutely. I think for many people, having somebody that actually stops and asks them a question, they have this pause because everything happens so fast that they just assume I put my story out there and everyone's gonna see it. But it's like, "Oh, no, I heard you. What I heard is that you're not sure why you'd bother saving for retirement when you're never gonna be able to afford a home." It's like, "Okay, well, let's talk about that. Why is that? What are some options? Is owning a home even the right answer?" Like, our priorities have changed, The American dream is not what it was in generations past for them. So, their priorities are gonna be different.
Yes. I'm accustomed to those conversations because when it's with my children, it often is followed by a boomer.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's like, "You don't understand." It's like, "I'm
Yeah.
trying. Let me
Yes.
try."
You, Christine, have a lot more credibility delivering that. Would you mind talking to my children? We should set that up
Sure,
afterwards here.
yeah, yep. Send them my email. I'd love to do a little, like, Zoom call with them, or maybe, if they want, I can create some TikToks if that would be easier for them.
I'm probably going to take you up on that, all kidding
Yeah.
aside. Well, speaking of, it's funny, when I was young, I remember there being the notion in the United States of a generation gap. Now there are
Mhm.
gaps today, of course, across the political spectrum and
Yeah.
other dimensions of American society, but we don't often think of it generationally, other than when we bring up this conversation about the differences with millennials and Gen Z. And it's wonderful that you are conscious of that and crafting your messaging accordingly. And you used a very important word there I'd love to hear you expand on: curiosity. It's so important. And how does that play into your vibe and the way that you work with your clients?
Well, I think curiosity can mean different things within, again, that perspective that people have, right? So for those more traditional or experienced, further in their career, maybe coming towards the end, if you frame change as being curious about how to continue something on and to grow and be successful, because that was kind of the driving factor, right? Is more like the money in the door, the achievements, you know, just checking all the boxes on the escalator of life, right? If you frame it like that, you're going to get them engaged. Just like if you are curious about an individual in a generation that's kind of just almost numb to interacting, especially the kids that were greatly impacted by COVID, right? And not getting those social years in there that are just so important, that we have to figure out how to meet them where they're at. And that requires curiosity, because they need to know that they do matter, even if they feel kind of lost and anonymous sometimes. So, and curious why they think that being an influencer is a career path. But that's like the elder millennial in me that I'm like, what? Okay. They don't even want to have a 401k plan because they want that to be their job. And it's like, okay,
Uh,
now I'm getting curious how we're going to help them find a solution for that, right? 'Cause
yes.
some are
Right.
successful.
But yeah, you're starting the conversation in a place that is aware of their consciousness and the experiences with which they've grown up. And when you
Yeah,
ask great questions to get people to open up about their hopes and their aspirations, but also their fears and their anxiety,
absolutely. Yes.
you're going to get better outcomes.
Yes. And you can do both, like you can ask both at the same time. We don't have to be positive all the time. And I think that toxic positivity is not handled well by the generations that are more recent, right? Like they
Love
don't
that.
want to hear that,
I don't think I have heard toxic
No,
positive.
yeah, it's
So
a
expand
thing.
on it. Enlighten me.
Yeah, so it's that, like, my favorite one that just drives me crazy is when people go, "Well, somebody has it worse." It's like, well, there's not a monopoly on suffering, Like, just because somebody has it worse doesn't mean that that's not horribly difficult for you to deal with where you're at, right? So you can't dismiss people's experiences and expect them to engage with you. And I think that's hard because people don't like to sit with heavy things. It's uncomfortable. We're not taught how to do that. And so you kind of get this washing of positivity over it. It's like, oh, it'll be fine.
I love it.
It'll work out. So it's like,
Yes. The unseen forces of goodness are going to overcome whatever
right.
we're going through. Well, as
Yeah.
opposed to tangible, practical advice on how to actually take positive action towards driving the outcomes
Right.
that we
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. You
And
need to acknowledge one piece to then figure out the way through that afterwards.
and I love that too, Christine, because I think in acknowledging that whatever somebody is going through, you have to pass through that gate first to get them to take you seriously and listen to the rest of what you have to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
As opposed to my parents' generation favorite refrain was get over it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's not very useful, right?
Yeah. No, it's not. And I don't like to equate my clients and other people with my children, with my daughter.
Right.
But there
Yeah.
is something to saying, like, okay, I acknowledge this is how you're feeling,
Yeah.
but let's talk through this. You're going to get so much further. They're going to feel comfortable coming to you when there's problems. And if you have that relationship set up, your clients are going to come to you when they have concerns about things that they might not have gone to another advisor about. You're going to have a much more productive relationship,
Indeed.
that's really about the growth
Right.
together, right? The collective. And it's
That's right.
something that's important to have. And that's how you learn resiliency, right? Is by you have to have mistakes to learn from them. And that can be really hard for people that kind of expect perfection out of themselves and things all the time. That saying that you've made a mistake is not fun to do, but it's a part of life.
Indeed. And when it's met with empathy and
Yeah.
understanding and a sharing of, well, I've been there too.
Mm-hmm.
And you
Yeah.
can feel like, okay, I'm not the first and I won't be the last one to make this mistake, whatever that one may have been.
Yeah.
That brings humanity to the conversation. Hopefully it gets the audience into a headspace where they're ready now to engage on, okay, what do we do about it?
Yeah.
Because
I
you're
know
right.
that it's not a quick, fix. It's not a on switch right away. You have to build that trust
That's
before,
right.
that's going to be fully engaged, but it's just a little bit at a time. So,
Indeed. In the right dosage.
yes. Yeah.
Yes. And you need
Too much for some people
monitoring that.
sometimes and not enough for others. So you got to
Yes.
know your audience.
Right. And as a mother, as you know, and
Hmm.
as I am a parent as well, we kind of develop a sixth sense for, am I over serving this dish
Yes.
or underserving it? And I got to throttle it and make sure,
Hmm.
it's
Yep.
the proper
It's a good
dosage.
reason I think everyone should have to learn how to drive a stick at some point because you kill it.
Gas
If
in
you
the
hit it
clutch.
too hard, you come off. Like, you got to know the right. It depends on the weather, the
That's great. I love the
incline.
analogy.
Yeah, that's also something.
If
I
you
don't know.
don't do it right, you stall the engine, right?
Correct. Yep. And then you're
Yes.
like, well, that sucks.
I love it.
Gotta start all over again.
And you and I both know Chicago and Twin Cities, the notion of the winter driving part of that analogy.
Yes. Yep.
So this is a good build up to what we like to wrap these conversations with, Christine, which is, and this is perfectly set up for this, given what you've shared with us. And this is wonderful. I appreciate your generosity. Imagine we have a time machine and you can go back to talk to young Christine and you're going to give her advice. What would you say?
Oh man, there's probably two key points. One would be that you are capable of anything you want to set your mind to. And if that means you have to be too much for some people, they're just not your people, right? That's the first one. The second one would be look for the advocates. So who's speaking for you when you're not at the table, right? And that's, especially as a woman, that's something that's really important to have advocates. And it's not just women. I mean, there are people that are going to bat for you whether or not they're there, and know who those people are and also be that person. So,
Wonderful. Love. That's a wonderful conclusion. Know who
yes,
they are and then be that
be
person
that person.
when
Be
it's
the
your turn to do
change.
so.
Yep,
That's great. I love it.
absolutely.
Christine, this has been enlightening and
Yeah,
truly enjoyable. Thank you. I could continue
same
this for
here.
hours more, and
I know.
we'll probably set up phase 2 of this conversation. I'm sure
That'd be great.
listeners would enjoy that.
Yeah,
Thank you so much
absolutely.
for generously sharing, and we will be back soon with another episode of Gray to Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Gray to Great. I hope you're walking away with a few new ideas, a few bold strategies, and a bit more fuel to take your business further than ever. If you found today's conversation valuable, Make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with a colleague. The best way to stay sharp is to keep learning together. So I'll see you next time right here where we will cut through the noise to bring you what really matters. Until then, keep pushing forward because there's no gray area in achieving success.